Hello and welcome to the Gale Blade News. The number of private tenants in England who have fallen behind on rent has doubled during the coronavirus pandemic, new research suggests. Polling for housing charity Shelter estimated 226,785 are now in arrears despite having been up to date in March, out of a total of 442,403. It said the figures showed the need for action before a ban on new evictions ends next month. The government said those hit hardest would get appropriate protection. A ban on new evictions of social or private tenants in England and Wales have been extended for 2 months and is currently due to end on the 23rd of August. But the charity Shelter is warning that the winding down of the government's furlough scheme could leave people even more exposed to eviction if they lose their jobs. A Shelter poll of 1,058 private renters in England conducted by YouGov estimated 442,403 of the country's 8.7 million renters, roughly 5%, were in arrears in early June. Of them, 226,785 said they were up to date with payments in March before the height of the pandemic. Of those who had contact with their landlord or letting agent since March, around 6% of those surveyed said they had been threatened with eviction. Around a third of respondents said they feel more depressed and anxious about their housing situation, with 30% also experiencing sleepless nights. The charity's chief executive, Polly Neate, said thousands of renters were at risk of homelessness unless the government changed the law on evictions. We know people have been doing whatever they can to pay their rent and keep their homes safe, she said. Despite this, the minute the evictions ban lifts, the 230,000 already behind with their rent could be up for automatic eviction if they've built up 8 weeks' worth of arrears, she added. She called on ministers to make small changes to eviction law to ensure no renter is automatically evicted and the impact of COVID-19 is always considered. The Scottish Government has amended legislation to prevent new evictions for up to 6 months for those struggling with arrears. In Northern Ireland, a requirement for a 12-week notice to quit period for all tenancies became law in May. Responding to Shelter's polling, Labour said emergency legislation was needed to protect renters from eviction. Shadow Housing Secretary Tangham Debonair said the government seems to be more interested in protecting landlords' incomes than preventing families from losing their homes in the middle of a deadly pandemic. Rough sleeping had more than doubled under the Tories before coronavirus. If we go back to business as usual, many thousands of people will find themselves sleeping on the streets this winter. The Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government said it had taken unprecedented action to support renters during the pandemic. We have introduced the furlough scheme to protect jobs, provided over £6.5 billion to strengthen the welfare safety net, a spokesperson said. They added the government had also made the housing benefit system more generous by increasing it to cover 30% of the average market rent in each area. We're working with the judiciary to provide appropriate protection to those who have been particularly affected by coronavirus when proceedings start again. So what do you think of this? Are you someone who's currently in problems? Have you had difficulties with renting or keeping up with your rents? Or are you in a situation where you're actually very concerned about what you're doing? From my perspective, as a landlord, I am concerned about these extensions happening because that means that my tenants could essentially defer on their payments while still using the facilities. From my point of view, that isn't fair because in the same way that you've got bills, I've got for the tenancy, I have bills to answer for utilities, water, gas, electricity, council tax and various other taxes as well, which I don't have a choice but to pay. From my personal opinion, it's just not a fair thing because if you go by some of these models, schemes such as Ireland's 3-month scheme, if someone defers that much money, that is a lot of income for me. And whilst they still getting the benefit of the house, and that's costing a lot of money, which I can't be affording at the moment. So this actually makes me quite angry. If people have that kind of mentality that they don't have to pay and they can just leave, it makes it very difficult to actually get hold of them again and to chase them down for that money. And I just don't think it's it's an ideal situation. Yes, I know their incomes have been reduced, but I think there needs to be more requirements of these people. For example, I see the point of, if you're wasting lots of electricity, having like 10 lights on in the house on one go, then you're costing a load of money when the electricity doesn't need to be on. Whatever you think, leave your comments down below. Like the video if you enjoyed it, and don't forget to subscribe.